All right, so it is Tuesday of my final week of my neurology rotation. And this week I'm in the Neuro Critical Care unit. For this clerkship, specifically at the location that I'm at, we have to do a week of neurocritical care. I think at the other locations, you can either do pediatrics or neurocritical care, but either way. So I have it this last week, which honestly, it's nice for me because it's kind of one of our more intense weeks, and I don't have anything on Thursday and Friday because that's when my Shelf and OSCE are. It's a bit of an interesting time in, medical education because it is just after July 1st. So a lot of the new doctors, the interns have started. Neurology is one of those residencies where your intern year is usually not part of the actual neurology residency. So you will do a year, usually in internal medicine, and then go into your neurology residency starting as a PGY2. The residency program that is at the hospital that I'm at right now, they have a bunch of new people, but they're not fresh out of medical school, but they're still being oriented to the hospital. In their intern year, they might not have done a lot of neurology. Sometimes intern years will have a few months of electives, so I would assume that they would do that in neurology. But, for a lot of them, they might not have done any neurology this past year. So even though it's the field they're going into, they, really have to brush up on some stuff. So there's been a lot of residents around shadowing, not really participating in, the patient care of the teams. They are just kind of getting a flow for how things work, where things are, all that kind of stuff. So with that being said, it's kind of put a lot more work on the PGY3s and PGY4s. So on the team that I'm on, there's one PGY3 and then an NP that's helping out. And then, like I said, there's a PGY2 who has really only been shadowing. So the workload for the PGY3 and NP is pretty high. Going back, Monday went in at 7, got assigned one patient, chart checked them, went and saw them. Rounds started at 9. Rounds for the neurocritical care, it's only walking rounds, so it means, you'll walk around the unit, find a patient room. Outside of the room, someone will give a presentation, whether it was me, the NP, or the resident. We'll give the presentation to the attending, and then we'll talk about it a little bit, maybe. He'll ask some questions based on the presentation. At that time, they usually won't do the assessment and the plan. It's really just why the patient is there, what's going on, any overnight events, and then the physical exam that they did that day. Then we'll go and see the patient all as a team. The attending will ask some questions, do a physical. Then we'll come out of the room and then kind of talk about a plan for them. Went around, did all that for all of our patients. My attending is neurocritical care and neurointerventional. I think he did a 4-year fellowship after his 4-year residency. So he is very, very well trained, very smart, but with being neurointerventional, he has to be called to emergency procedures. So today, actually, he didn't even round with us at all because there was a bunch of code strokes that were called and he needed to go and do a mechanical thrombectomy. So while that is very cool, it kind of, makes the days a little bit more unpredictable. You do morning rounds, go get lunch, maybe go to the noon conference, and then there's also afternoon rounds, which are much faster. You don't really do a whole presentation. It's more just checking up on the patient again, seeing if anything has changed, and then, further discussing the plan and making sure everyone is on the same page between us, specialists, nursing staff, of what needs to be done for the patient. Honestly, kind of like it. I was a little bit scared because, critical care is, there's a lot going on. The rounds can be very long. You have to cover so many different organ systems, which is kind of unique to neurocritical care in relation to all the other neurology specialties that I've done. But I do really like the acuity of what's going on, and I've been able to see some very interesting pathologies, a lot of post-op neurosurgical patients, some really crazy brain bleeds. So yeah, all in all, it's been good. It also, is a little tough because this is our first time in the neurocritical care unit. In IM, we didn't really spend any weeks in there. Sometimes we would go up there if there was like a rapid call or whatever, but we didn't really spend time rotating in the ICU. So this is our first experience with it, and then we won't get any more experience until like after step. But all in all, it's been pretty good. All right, it is Thursday afternoon. I just got home from my shelf exam, and honestly, I don't know how to feel about it. I mean, honestly, I kind of feel similar to how all the shelf exams feel, where, there's a few really easy ones, a few that are like, I would never get this in a million years, like, what are you talking about? And then most of them were, a fair amount of difficulty where you're between like one or two answers, which is always the worst, because if you are guessing wrong a lot of the times, you're not going to do very well. So, like I said, that's how I felt afterwards. I was honestly surprised with the kind of things that they tested. So, like, on our practice exams, presentations of different kind of strokes where you would have to be able to localize the lesion. There was, like, maybe one of those, in 110 questions, only having one stroke question is kind of crazy, because on the practice exams, they're only 50 questions long, and we would have, like, 3 or 4. So I was a little bit surprised about that. And then there was honestly a lot of psych, which makes sense, apparently, for actually being, a board-certified neurologist or psychiatrist. Like, once you're an attending, 30% of, like, the other specialty is on your licensing exam. So, like, for the neuro exam, 30% of it is psych. However, we didn't really do a lot of psych content in the clerkship. I haven't done psych yet, so those questions were a little bit rough, but hopefully I guessed a few of those right. It'll be a few days before we get our scores back. That's sort of our first piece of information for our grades, is our shelf exam, which since it's Thursday, I don't think it'll be back tomorrow, and then over the weekend they're definitely not going to send them out. So probably like Monday or Tuesday I will figure out what I got. Our shelf exams are only 25% of our grades, so as long as you're in like a relatively average range, it's not gonna like make or break you. Obviously, if you bomb it, it could affect your grade a good amount, but honestly, as long as you're doing like decent on it, it's really not gonna have too much of an impact on your final grade. I have my OSCE tomorrow. Just kind of interesting how all the clerkships do their shelf and OSCE differently. Like for FM, which is the clerkship that I did before this, I'm pretty sure I had my shelf on like a Monday. Or was my OSCE? I don't really remember. But anyway, I had like one of the components of my final exams on Monday and then the other on Friday. So it was kind of nice to just like get one of those out of the way and then kind of focus on the other one. Same thing with how it worked for this clerkship, where I take my shelf first and then the OSCE after. Honestly, you can't even really study for the OSCE. Going through the clerkship and, studying for the shelf and all that is really your preparation. You obviously can try to think like, what are the common things that they could test me on? But that's kind of all of the preparation that you can do. So I feel like taking it after the shelf is probably best. So all your energy is dedicated to the shelf. Then after you're done with that exam, you can be like, all right, like, let me think, what could they potentially test me on? So I prefer that to having the OSCE first, because the OSCE is usually like 3-4 hours long. So it kind of drains you. And then, at least for me, since I'm down south, I have to spend 2.5 hours just driving to and from it. So it ends up being a long day. And after that, I just have no motivation to do any studying for the shelf. So I would rather just focus on the shelf and then have the OSCE after. Thankfully, this clerkship is like that. Okay, so it is Sunday afternoon. Haven't checked in since the Shelf exam. So Thursday I had my Shelf, then Friday was our OSCE. It was, actually we had our OSCE and then also some case presentations. So as a part of this clerkship, we had, we were split up into groups, and then we presented like one of the interesting cases that we saw throughout our 6-week rotation. It is something that happens a lot in residency and by association clerkships. You know, usually when you're at an academic center, they'll have things called morning reports where, you know, early in the morning, like 7:30, 8, the whole department will come together and have a lecture. My experience, usually the morning reports will be like a case presentation like this, where, you know, one of the resident teams will present an interesting case, sort of walk through the whole thing from the initial presentation, the labs, imaging, all that kind of stuff, and then, you know, have some discussion points at the end based on, you know, what differentials they had, what diagnosis they ended up, you know, deciding on, and it's just a way to educate the whole team. Because of that, a few of our clerkships have integrated these kind of presentation styles into our clerkship just to give us practice, because we're going to be doing that in residency, so I think that's pretty good. So like I said, we split ourselves up into groups and did some presentations. We had the first round of it a few weeks ago on a Friday, the other half Friday morning, and then after that I had to go up to the school for the OSCE. OSCE didn't go too bad. It was only 2 SP encounters, which is really nice. I think maybe how our clerkships are going to work is the 8-week rotations. For your OSCE, you'll have 3 encounters, and then for your 6 weeks, you only have 2. So that's always nice. And then there was also like a quiz that we had to do, and then like another assignment that was due at like 8 p.m. So it ended up being a very long day because the OSCE didn't even start until like 1:30, and it was up north, and then I had to drive back in beach traffic, so that sucked. But after the OSCE, had a few friends over to Mackenzie's place. She has this nice outdoor area at her apartment complex with grills and stuff, so we made burgers, hot dogs. Like I said, a few of our classmates came over, and we all finished our current clerkship that day, so it was a nice way to celebrate and unwind. And then Saturday, during the day, we didn't really do much, but Mackenzie and I went to dinner to celebrate a few different things. One, just being M3s, you know, finishing, you know, being halfway through medical school. It's a pretty big accomplishment. Also, like I said, a lot of us finished clerkships the day prior, so celebrating that too. So that was really great. A place neither of us had been to. We haven't really explored any of the restaurants around this area too much, so that was great. Today also haven't really done much. We're just relaxing, you know, trying to breathe a little bit before our next clerkships. We are actually swapping clerkships, so she was on psych, I just finished neuro, so now I will be doing psych, she will be on neuro. That's just kind of how our school does things, where for our 6-week clerkships, they're kind of paired up together with things that are relatively similar, so you always do neuro and psych back to back, whether you do one first or the other. And then pediatrics and OBGYN are also paired up. So I'm going to psych, and then after that I have peds, and then I'll finish with OB-GYN. But for her, after neuro, she is OB-GYN, and then she finishes with peds. I think it's actually a good way to set it up because, like I said, those sets of specialties are very related. So it makes the transition a little bit easier, and what you learn in one thing will, you know, carry over into the other specialty. Like I said, I'm starting on psych. I don't really have too much information on it yet. We have an orientation tomorrow morning, I think that's where I'll get my schedule and everything. So I don't really have too many thoughts on it other than hearing stories from my classmates, and I think a lot of them honestly enjoyed it more than they thought they would, so hopefully that is the same with me. Alright, well that is going to do it for today's video. If you enjoyed, please be sure to leave a like below and subscribe if you want to see videos like this in the future. Thanks, and I'll see you in the next one.